Um, so most of you are aware that I have started a new series, and this is on the factors of awakening, the 7 factors of awakening. And so far we've covered the first 2. The first one is sati, which is mindfulness. And then the second one I talked about last week is called investigation of Dhamma. And Dhamma has sort of 2 main meanings. With a small d, it means things, and with a big D, it means the teachings of the Buddha. And so we use the framework of the teachings of the Buddha to look at things that arise in our practice. So we're mostly talking about the hindrances. We sit down and we're with our meditation object, which for many of us is the breath. We're focusing our breath, and then boom, our mind gets hijacked into planning something or reviewing something from the past or worrying about something. And so we can use these various frameworks that I talked about last week to investigate that helps us loosen our grip on these distractions so that we can come back and be with our breath, be with our meditation object, and move towards stillness. So today I'm going to talk about the next 2 factors, which are energy and joy. But before I get into that, I want to zoom out and just talk a little bit about the big picture, um, how these factors of awakening fit into sort of the bigger picture of our meditation practice. So the first question we can ask is, why do we meditate? And the answer is to decrease the suffering, decrease the amount of suffering that we experience in our life. And, the Buddha said, I teach one thing and one thing only, and that is that there is suffering and how to come to the end of suffering. Now, just a little caveat, suffering here is referring to mental, emotional suffering. We're in a human realm with human bodies, and they're subject to old age, sickness, and death. So we're going to have aches and pains in the body. And so our practice is not going to eliminate those, but our practice is going to help us not to stab ourselves with that second arrow, not to weep and wail and fuss about the reality of things that happen to us. So there's less suffering when we're not adding in that second arrow. So the practice is all about decreasing the suffering in our life. And the Buddha sort of expanded this statement of, I teach one thing and one thing only, suffering and the ending of suffering. And he expanded that into what's known as the 4 Noble Truths. And the first truth is that there's suffering. And I'm sure we've all experienced that: loss of a loved one, difficulties at the workplace, relationship problems, life plans that go awry. So I'm sure we've all experienced suffering in our lives. The second noble truth is that there's a cause for suffering, and that cause is desire, either desiring things that we don't yet have. And that creates suffering because we want something and we don't have it, and we're feeling the lack of it. And it's that feeling, that lack, that is the feeling of suffering. And then the other type of desire is desiring something that's in our face that we don't want in our life, and we're desiring it to go away. So having ill will or aversion to it. The third noble truth is the good news. It's the truth of cessation, that we can come to the end of suffering. And how do we do that? That's the fourth noble truth, which is the Noble Eightfold Path, the path that we follow to bring us to the end of suffering. And I wanted to just spend a few minutes to sort of show how these 7 factors of awakening that we're talking about now, how they jive with the Noble Eightfold Path, how do they fit in with this path? The Buddha gave us many, many different frameworks to look at life and to deal with issues. And so some of them, come at life from slightly different angles. So they're not going to be all exactly the same. So the Noble Eightfold Path, the first step on that path is right view. So which is basically understanding the Four Noble Truths. It also includes the teaching or the understanding that the Buddha realized about reality, that everything's due to causes and conditions. So that's a part of right view. And the other part of right view is karma. Karma is our intentions. Are we intending to do good, or are we intending to cause harm? And depending on our intentions, we have certain outcomes known as vipaka. So the summary is do good, get good, do bad, get bad. And that may be immediate, it may be later in this lifetime, it may be many lifetimes from now when this ripens, when the intentions ripen. So that's the first step in the Noble Eightfold Path, just right view, which is understanding reality. The second is right intention, and there's three parts to this. The first is renunciation, which means starting to let go more and more of all the desires that we have, all the wants that we have, just being content with where we're at. Giving if somebody's in an abusive relationship, we're not asking them to be content with that. We're going to, hopefully they'll get support or whatever to move out of that situation. But just for us regular Joe Blows who have an okay life, and then it's trying to chip away at that greed. And just feel the peace and joy of contentment. So that's renunciation, which is a continuum from 0 to total renunciation. And then the other two aspects of right intention are metta, which is unconditional love, or just well-wishing for everyone, like not holding anger in your hearts, having this feeling of goodwill towards all beings. And the third part of right intention is compassion, caring for those who are suffering, for others who are suffering. And Ajahn Brahm summarizes these three right intentions as make peace, be kind, be gentle. So if you ever tune into his talks, you'll see those in those writings in big letters behind where he's sitting. Be kind, make peace, be kind, be gentle. So that's the first two steps of the Noble Eightfold Path, right view and right intention. And then next comes three moral parts of the path: right speech, right action, and right livelihood. So not causing harm, not causing pain with our speech or with the way we behave, and then hopefully being able to have a job that doesn't cause harm. So this is the moral background to our meditation practice. And then comes right effort and right sati, which sati is mindfulness. So this is now moving into our meditation practice. The other things are what we do in daily life to sort of have a baseline of generosity and kindness and morality on which we build our meditation practice. So then when we sit down in our meditation practice, that's our mindfulness. We're bringing mindfulness to our meditation object. And then we're using the four right efforts to let go of the hindrances and to build the 7 factors of awakening. And I'll say more about that in just a moment. And then the final step in the Noble Eightfold Path is samadhi, stillness, these deep states of, that eventually end up in jhana state. And then the Noble Eightfold Path ends there because that's the end of our sort of doing. And when we come out of these still states, our mind has such clarity that we're able to see reality. And this is when we gain the insights that lead us to awakening. But that part's not part of the path because it's not something we have to be doing. It's sort of a result. It's a result of the whole path and a result of being in that very still state, gaining such clarity that we could see reality and just gain the insight. So that's the final part. Now, on top of this baseline of morality and kindness, generosity, contentment, then we're doing our practice, our meditation practice of mindfulness. And there's sort of two major parts to this. One is letting go of the hindrances, all the distractions that arise, and the other is the building of the 7 factors of awakening. And this is what we use the 4 right efforts to do. And the word for efforts in Pali is padana. And I'm mentioning that because there is a difference. I'm going to be talking later on today about energy, and there's a difference between effort and energy. So effort has the word padana. So the first right effort is to prevent these hindrances, these distractions from arising. And how do we do that? We do that by focusing on our breath, focusing on our object of meditation. If we're fully there, fully engrossed with our breath, then our mind isn't going to be running off. And when we're off the cushion, not doing our formal practice, then we can just be mindful of whatever it is we're doing at the moment. And if we're fully present, fully there, then our mind isn't going to run off. But it takes years to train our mind to stay fully present. And so all of us have the experience of being with our breath or being with our meditation object, and then boop, off goes our breath here, or off goes our attention there, just off to the future planning, off to the past, rehashing things, worrying, whatever. And so this is when we bring in the second effort. So the first effort is to prevent this from happening. And we do that by being with our breath, our meditation object. And then when our mind wanders off, then we use the second effort to let go of the distraction that has pulled us away. And so when we did our series on the hindrances, we talked about a whole bunch of antidotes that can be used. I talk relentlessly about the holding technique, which is so helpful for letting go of hindrances. And then last week, I gave the talk on investigation of Dhammas, which is another framework to use to let go of these hindrances, these distractions that pull our mind away from our meditation practice. Then the third right effort is to cause the arising of these factors of awakening. And the first factor of awakening is sati, mindfulness. So just our practice of being with our breath, our practice of being with our meditation object, that gets things rolling. And then, of course, the second factor of awakening is investigation of dhammas. So when we're doing that, we're making we're working on the third effort, because using investigation of dhammas to let go of the hindrances, let go of the things that distract us, that pull our mind away from our breath. Then the fourth effort is to maintain and increase factors of awakening. And how do we do that? Just by continuing to focus on our breath. And so don't let yourself get worried about all these lists and all these different frameworks and whatever the Buddha has given. If it feels overwhelming, just remember to be with your breath, to be with your object of meditation. Um, and that'll just get you most of the way. It'd be helpful to have a few little antidotes for the hindrances, but the main thing is just remember to be with your breath. So, how do the factors of awakening jive in with the the Noble Eightfold Path? So, the Noble Eightfold Path sort of emphasizes the baseline of the factors, like as I said, generosity, kindness, morality, and then where the two of them meet is at sati, at mindfulness, because mindfulness is in both the Noble Eightfold Path factors and the seven factors of awakening. And then the four right efforts are in both, because we use the four right efforts in our investigation of Dhammas. So that's the second factor of awakening. And then the other factor that they both have is samadhi, stillness. So that's the last factor for the Noble Eightfold Path. It's the second to last one in the factors of awakening. The last one will be equanimity, which we'll be getting to in a few weeks. Okay, so that's the bit of background that I wanted to give, sort of the bigger picture. So now coming back to just the factors of awakening, today I'm going to talk about the third and fourth factors, which are energy, and the Pali word for energy is virya. So effort is padana, and energy is virya. And then I also will talk about joy, and piti is the Pali word for joy. So the first two factors, mindfulness and investigation of Dhamma, Ajahn Sona said, this is like being on your bicycle and pedaling uphill. So there's effort involved in that. But the beautiful thing is all the other factors of awakening are results. There's no more doing. They're just going to be an unfolding from these first two things that we are making effort to do. So we pedal uphill with our mindfulness, with our investigation as Dhamma, and then we can take our feet off the pedals and just coast downhill. Now, unfortunately, until we are fully awakened, it's not going to be steadily downhill. There's going to be little bumps where we have to pedal again. And we'll always have mindfulness is always present. Sati is always present, but it's the investigation of Dhamma. It's the dealing with these hindrances. So the hindrances do eventually gradually fall off one by one, but there's still some there right until the last stage of awakening. So we'll be coasting downhill and then, oops, a little uphill, and we'll have to do the investigation of Dhamma again, and then we'll coast again for a while. So that's how it's going to go. So energy, what not to do? What are the things that we can end up doing in our practice that kill energy or don't allow energy to arise? The first thing is don't try and use willpower. Don't try and use any kind of willpower to generate energy. It's just totally not sustainable. The second thing not to do that will kill energy is if we hold on to some kind of an idea of what our practice should be like or what we should be like. And then when we're not living up to that idea, then there's conflict in our mind, and that's just going to totally drain our energy. And Aya gave an example of this. I can't remember if it was we just had a retreat this weekend, so I can't remember if she said it during the retreat or at one of our Tuesday nights, but she gave an example of in the morning trying to put peanut butter on her toast, and the peanut butter had been in the fridge, and it was just like cement. She couldn't get the knife into it. And she found herself in this really aggravated interaction with the peanut butter jar. And then she caught herself, and she caught herself feeling this anger towards the peanut butter jar. But then she started stabbing herself with a second arrow. She started saying, like, I'm a nun. Nuns aren't supposed to get upset. Nuns aren't supposed to be angry. Nuns are supposed to be in fights with peanut butter jars. But then thank goodness she woke up to that. so so here she had this idea, like she had an idea of like what should a nun be like. And then she found herself um, having an experience that wasn't fitting in with her image of what a nun should be like. And then that was just causing a lot of distress. So if we do that kind of thing, we're just going to really drain our energy. So thank goodness she had her insight and she was able to let go. She stopped being angry at the peanut butter jar. And so we want to do the same thing when our hindrances arise, like when our minds wander off. We want to make sure that we don't get angry with ourselves because that's happened. This is just the reality of the moment. The reality of the moment is our minds have wandered off. That's the hindrance of restlessness. So we don't want to add on to that the hindrance of ill will, like beating ourselves up, being upset with ourselves. We're training our minds. Our minds are like little, small children. You're not going to beat your children. You're going to try and raise your children with love and with kindness, with gentleness. So that's how we want to, the attitude that we want to have towards our mind when it runs off. And as I said, we're going to be doing this all the way until full awakening, full enlightenment. So get used to doing this. It's going to be a while. Okay, so those are the things not to do. So, as I mentioned, energy is a resultant. It's a resultant of these causes and conditions that we put in, which is mostly our mindfulness and our investigation of Dhammas. So, when we stop grasping, we can tune into a different kind of energy. This is the energy of relaxation and release. And it happens when we let go of goals and we're just content being in the present moment. We become aware of what is rather than what we want things to be like. And this spiritual wisdom is a source of energy, a peaceful energy. And mostly, as I said, it happens from focusing on our breath or our meditation object. But there are some other little causes and conditions we can put in that are mentioned in the suttas, the teachings of the Buddha. So in the Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 46, that whole chapter is all about the factors of awakening. So I've got a few quotes here from various verses in that chapter. So in the second verse, the Buddha said, and what fuels the arising of the awakening factor of energy? Or when it has arisen, what fully develops it? And then he answers, there are the elements of initiative, persistence, and exertion. So those are the qualities that we can just bring gently to our meditation practice, to bring gently to bringing our focus onto our breathing, onto our meditation, like persistently being there. In the fifth verse, the Buddha says, a meditator develops the awakening factors relying on seclusion. So what seclusion means is, first of all, finding a secluded, like quiet place to have our daily meditation practice. And then also being secluded from the sensory world. So when we sit down, we're just with our breath. We're not sitting and enjoying music and, sights and smells and touches, whatever. So we're secluded from the sensory world, just focusing on our breath, and then hopefully secluded from these hindrances, these distractions that pull us away. So that's going to move us towards developing these factors of awakening. Then in verse 6, this is the longest one I'm going to read to you. And so the Buddha is talking to this meditator called Kundalya. So Kundalya asks the Buddha, but what things must be developed and cultivated in order to fulfill the 7 factors of awakening? And the Buddha answers, the 4 kinds of mindfulness meditation. But what things must be developed and cultivated in order to fulfill the 4 kinds of mindfulness meditation? And the Buddha answers, the 3 kinds of good conduct. And then Kundalya asks, but what things must be developed and cultivated in order to fulfill the 3 kinds of good conduct? And the Buddha answers, sense restraint. And then he goes on, and Kundalya, how is sense restraint developed and cultivated so as to fulfill the 3 kinds of good conduct? A meditator sees an agreeable sight with their eyes. They don't desire it or enjoy it, and they don't give rise to greed. Their mind and body are steady internally, well settled and well freed. But if they see a disagreeable sight, they're not dismayed. Their mind isn't hardened, dejected, or full of ill will. Their mind and body are steady internally, well settled and well freed. And then he goes on to say the very same thing about sounds, odors, tastes, touches, or ideas. Their mind and body is steady internally, well settled and well freed. When a meditator's mind and body are steady internally, they're well settled and well freed when it comes to both agreeable and disagreeable sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, and ideas. That's how sense restraint is developed and cultivated so as to fulfill the 3 kinds of good conduct. And how are the 3 kinds of good conduct developed and cultivated? A meditator gives up bad conduct by way of body, speech, and mind, and develops good conduct by way of body, speech, and mind. And how are the 4 kinds of mindfulness meditation developed and cultivated so as to fulfill the 7 factors of awakening? A meditator meditates by observing, and aspects of the first kind of mindfulness is mindfulness of the body, and the commonest mindfulness of the body is the breath, being aware of the breath. The second area of mindfulness is it's called Vedana, and that's feeling tone. So that's the feeling tone of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral that arises with every sensory experience. The third aspect of mindfulness is being aware of what's going on in our mind. And the fourth is those dhammas that, like, being aware, are the hindrances arising or the factors of awakening arising? So the Buddha says that's how the 4 kinds of mindfulness meditation are developed and cultivated so as to fulfill the 7 awakening factors. And how are the 7 awakening factors developed and cultivated? A meditator develops the awakening factors of mindfulness, investigation of dhammas, energy, joy, and then what we haven't got to yet, tranquility, samadhi, which is stillness, and equanimity, which rely on seclusion. So this is what I talked about, taking that secluding yourself from the hurly-burly of life, finding a quiet place to sit down and meditate, secluding your mind from the sensory objects, just being with your breath, and hopefully being secluded from the hindrances. Okay, the next was verse 12. A meditator with good friends can expect to develop and cultivate the 7 awakening factors. So the good friends are the Kalyana Mittas. So that's, just look around you. It's everyone in this room. And for those of you in the Zoom room, everybody in your Zoom room, these are our good spiritual friends. And if we can have a spiritual friend that's maybe a little bit more advanced on the path than we are, then that can really give us a lot of encouragement, because we can see where they're at and maybe pick their brain on how they got there, and and just use them as encouragement for our own practice. In verse 31, meditators, whatever qualities are skillful, all of them are rooted in diligence and meet at diligence, and diligence is said to be the best of them. A meditator who is diligent can expect to develop and cultivate the 7 awakening factors. So that's, being diligent about doing our practice, taking the time to do it. So it all boils down to sitting and being with our breath, or being with our meditation object. So if you don't remember anything else, just remember that. So I have a few other quotes here, and I don't know where they came out of the suttas, but one was, one who investigates Dhamma, tireless energy is aroused. So that's the second factor of awakening. As I said, there's those 2 where you're pedaling uphill, being with our breath, and then investigating when the hindrances arise. And just the fact of doing that arouses energy. And then, our teacher Beth Upton often talks about being with our breath, being with our meditation object, as if we're having coffee with our best friend. And so, if you're with your best friend, you're feeling enthusiasm and goodwill. You're really interested in what your friend is telling you when you're together. You enjoy being with them. You're grateful to have this friend. All of these qualities cause the arising of energy. So that's, energy is the 3rd factor. And then the 4th factor is joy, known as piti and Pali. And this joy, it's not due to sensory experiences. So it's not due to beautiful sights or sounds or tastes or touches or smells. It comes from within. It's one of these factors, we're on the downhill, and it's just a resultant of us sitting and being with our meditation object and using the investigation of Dhamma to let go of the hindrances. And this is a natural unfolding, a natural result of those causes and conditions that we put in. So we can call it a spiritual joy, because it's not based on sensory experiences. And it's a bit coarse. It's got some lots of energy to it, but it's going to eventually evolve into tranquility, which we'll talk about next week. So this joy, this piti, can be manifested in many different ways. One is, it can just feel like the hair of your body is standing on end, sort of that kind of a feeling. You can have shivers in your body, or it can come like a wave. It can come in waves, so like a strong thrill, or just feeling it, and like energy flowing through your body. Or it can be a feeling of lightness, like you're very light or your body's expanding, or maybe even feel like it's floating. There's such a feeling of lightness. Or it can just be a really overall sort of wash of quiet joy that just sort of saturates your entire body, leading to really deep physical and mental comfort. So there's many, many ways that this joy can manifest. Now, it's important in our meditation practice, all of this is arising. It's a resultant of us being focused on our breath. So we don't want to get distracted and, by the energy and the joy that's arising. It's allow it to be there, allow it to be there in your peripheral awareness, but you can't let go of your focus on your breath, because that's the cause. If you let go of the focus on your breath, then this is going to dissipate because you've taken away the cause. So very important, not to get too excited and turn your focus to these things, these fun things that are arising. Stay with your breath. Um, okay, so I'll end there, and next week we'll talk about the next two factors, tranquility and samadhi.
Andamayam Brahmagataya Sadhu Kalandadamase Sadhu 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 Anumodami